Chile here with Sirius Dallas Moon, and this is Moon Hour. Moon is 10 degrees Taurus, midheaven 29 degrees Aries, ascendant 6 degrees Leo. And in the energy, the dehumanization of women. Venus is 22 in Taurus, and the midheaven was just crossing Chiron, and now is with the sun that is about to ingress to Taurus. We're already within the conjunction of Neptune, Mercury, Mars, and Saturn. And here are two things that are beginning to connect for me. So I'm here with some Deneb Algadim materia, some Uranus in Taurus, and Alkaid materia. And when we think about the war as per those that arrange the war, but also the cult brainwashing, which is done by ritual abuse of the people who are supposed to participate in the wars. One is that they see the conquered people as the feminine, and feminine is a degradation ritual. And the other is the dehumanization, the enemy, which basically means they have dehumanization of the feminine. And and yeah, I just think about women married to, I don't know, people from the secret societies, and these women are basically, for whichever reason, entangled in relationships with men that dehumanize the feminine part of themselves and see the feminine part as a loser and degradational. These men cannot have good intimate relations even with themselves. They are haters to themselves. Now, it's not about blame and shame. It was the result of ritual abuse. But a point of interference, and let me light up some Jupiter in Cancer candle for the exaltation of Jupiter in Cancer. Jupiter is actually exalted in the sign of the moon. And moon exalted in the sign of Venus is basically the night sect. So Jupiter, the great benefic of any sect that has order, hierarchical or ahierarchic, is exalting at the other sect. Is exalting, not that it's very difficult to dissect them into sects. This is originally as one of the results of ritual abuse, okay, along the centuries. But the great benefic of the day sect is basically best situated in the night sect. While the night sect is receptive to the great benefic, because Cancer, the moon is, if you think about the moonlight is the light of the sun. This is also why it's so illogical to put them in different sects. It's not that it doesn't work. It works in a reality where there is rape and ritual abuse. Hellenistic astrology was descriptive of astrology in Hellenistic times. It's kind of like, hey, if they rape people and everybody is courtesan, sans your day team, it exalts at the other team. Your I am somehow exalts at the other sect that defends women. I'm going to say it again. Your I am, if you're the day sect, the sun exalts at the sect of the moon. But not just at the sect of the moon, at the sect of the moon that defends from rape. That's Mars. Also, Mars of the night sect exalts at Capricorn. Why? Because for Mars in Capricorn, there are implications to being a rapist. And also in Saturn, this is the Saturn-Mars combination. With Saturn, how should I say that? If there is no rape, it's going to accumulate to something that we see Saturn and Venus being friends in horary astrology, because Saturn is longevity and Venus is union. But if there is rape, it's very difficult for Saturn and Venus to get along. Now, when we talk about feminization as degradation and dehumanization of the enemy, which is basically dehumanization of women, we see that this type of setting, how should I say that? It consumes itself. It causes the generation of DNA. If you think about Aquarius, Aquarius can be is the nervous system. Aquarius can be a structure that allows for the nervous system to be healthy and rejuvenate. And Aquarius can be the generation of the nervous system. What's the difference? Rape and slavery-based society, whereas there is dehumanization and degradation, or society of sovereigns, irrespective of their origin, gender, bloodline. Can't stress that enough. With Saturn-Mars combinations. I was reading, at least from my perspective where I'm at, I see a lot of people on social media that hate on the Jews. Now, the reason they hate on the Jews is because the bankers were Jews. So it's not that they have something personal against Jews, they just don't like the orchestrations of war. And I tell them, listen, abolish rape and slavery in your own societies. If you have a degradation ritual, you're basically doomed. If you do abolish rape and slavery in your own societies, then you become stronger, and it's very difficult for something that wants to rape or enslave to permeate the boundary. For example, for Israel, some infants, they were somehow raped through the astral, but they were programmed to have misplaced arousal at very weird things. I'm talking about infants here. And so they spend a lifetime curating from lineage types of either sex addictions or in sexuality that is not compounding to something healthy. Now, it's not only in Israel, I know. I have a colleague in Bulgaria that she said she, as a young girl, used to also have these things where there would be self-pleasure, but it would be seen horrible scenes. And this is a part of this programming. Now, and now she has child sees violence, and told to paint monsters, to paint this, to paint that. Basically, the children are instructed to create a physical manifestation, whether in art or in statue. And this is a part of those weird rituals. They're supposed to alleviate the troubles in the psyche. And this thing relates to rites that are done in secret societies that the families don't even see. So we would have a child that all they would want would be, if I think about, a society. Oh, why doesn't this child at this age have a boyfriend or a girlfriend? Or some people would get into relationships that are not patterns of, not healthy relationships. Sometimes now, if women would find it difficult to find what pleases them, and then it would look like they're after power, money. No, but they felt disempowered erotically, and then they would be drawn to someone that, let's say, either has exceptional beauty or, if I think about my parents, then both my parents are looking like movie actors. And well, all my parents in that case. Anyway, now, but then with the relational patterns, it would create challenges to actually have intimacy. And this is causing a reconstruction that each person, to the degree that they would go to deconstruct, they're basically deconstructing from many, many things. And the Epstein files is just a byproduct of these things. Societies would see themselves as undivine. and then their actions would compound to such that the society would find it difficult to look at itself and identify that the, how should I say that the rapist was the society and not the child. The society would live best like on the children. I'm talking about the society, not each and every parent or something like that. Um, but I'm talking about the sense of energy. Because children were like the women and they were dehumanized and basically degraded. This is why divorce, for example, was something that was a big taboo. Or marrying a person from another sect or another tribe that was not calculated strategic marriage, that was taboo. And in that sense, because the women and the children were not seen as divine, they were seen as profane, and a society like that becomes the profane. So it's susceptible to invasion, susceptible to being colonized, susceptible to persecution. Some say it is by design. And the sense of otherness is something that is dissociated from by trauma bond and basically forms of rape. Moon 11 degrees. There's something about the area of the equator, or the area where I'm broadcasting from, which is Israel Palestine. The junk in the society kind of assembles to explode away into exile. No one has ever managed to occupy this area for long because this area requires a dynamic equilibrium that honors the feminine. But it's in particular, first of all, this area, how should I say, from the poles is the margins. Okay, granted that we're not just a high-flying disk. If we are a high-flying disk, it's the center of the disk. And so if we are a high-flying disk, it's the center of the disk. And if we are a sphere, it's the margins. Now, who sees that planet as a high-flying disk? It kind of reminds me of, does the Earth revolve around the sun? Now, do I believe this place is a high-flying disk or a spherical object? I think that the frailty of the high-flying disk would break it in space, and then we would be a high-flying crunched cracker. But if we are a sphere, it means that this equator from the poles is simply the margins, but also the equator is a kind of circular center where the poles are the margins. Now, everything meeting up at the first decan of Aries. We're talking about castration of the lineages. Why? Because what brings life from degradation and humiliation and rape basically brings death. What sees the feminine as not having the right to be doesn't actually have the right to be by its own periscope. People are so occupied with trying to make other people feel the bad experiences rather than transmute to good experiences. Moon 11 degree, Venus 22. Sun and Chiron are still with Aries. Mercury, Mars, Saturn. The excess fire or the excess inflammation that is generated by degradation and dehumanization of the feminine is not sustaining. Mars is also a sign of business. And by the way, as I opened to read, hundreds of European diplomats are calling to suspend the association with Israel. Indeed, Chiron, Sun, the new moon was opposite Spica and opposite ascendant of Israel. Neptune in seventh house of Israel says isolation of. But abolition of slavery and rape is necessary to tackle the Israeli problem or the Jewish problem. You cannot fight a Jewish banker with a rapey elder. You cannot fight a Jewish banker and then go pay money to rape a woman at some brothel or another. You cannot fight a Jewish banker and be upset you have a girl and not a boy, because in your lineage, girls do not continue the legacy of the father. You cannot fight a Jewish banker and sell the daughters if they don't want to marry. You cannot fight a Jewish banker women as undivine. The Jewish banker would call it enlightenment, and your tribe will call it colonization, genocide, democide, femicide, and so on. the Pakistani people refer to Israel as cancerous state and curse the people that caused wars in Europe to have the Jews of Europe out of Europe. But they still can't fight this cancer without supporting women and honoring children. Now, I don't know too much about Pakistani culture. I know that they are fighting with the Indians, and the Indians have caste system. And the Indians are challenging their caste system right now. Is a woman safe in Pakistan? When I was in Model UN, there was a representative from Pakistan. And one of the people that arranged the conference, they took him by car. Then was conference, maybe they had a drink or something, and police stops them. The driver forgot his license, and then the police asked who is with him in the car. And then the Pakistani person takes out his passport, it's the only identification he had, and on this passport is written, valid everywhere except for Israel. Somehow they managed to get out of this. And that's how we got a representative of Pakistan in Holy Land Model UN conference. Um, by the way, there's a shit ton of social engineering, and they hack nervous systems. Um, Now, in the bigger background, like I said, we are not entering a gladio phase. We are entering a bisextile. We're still in the bisextile, but Neptune and Pluto are going to separate from a century-long sextile. What does it mean? If the bisextile was accommodating for criminal organizations within the governing global, okay, basically the mafia became informant. Then now we are having the opposite direction. And we are beginning to see that by the annihilation of organized crime. If in the past, if I take a look even at Israel, organized crime was fighting one another. How did it end? They killed one another. But now there is actually action against. Okay. Ebam? Now, when such things happen, what is the one place to go to? If you have rape in your lines, You have a fifth legion within the dissected psyche of every child. Oh, amazing. תודה רבה. כן, כן, תודה, תודה. Thank you. אמרתי לך שאם זה בבית זה יימצא. Now, when we talk about the feminine, we said the people that were conquered, we said children, we said women, the disabled, the sick, and the lower classes. So when we're talking about honoring the feminine, we're basically talking about sovereignty, per individual. Monarchs had a lot of concubines, and then they were the concubine of the oil of the Rockefellers. We can't say it. Women were only climbing up the ladder back then by having a lot of concubines, which would be like a women harem, but the woman is having the harem, and then they had to be consolidated into bigger empires. Chiron Aries, not now, Chiron Aries, לא עכשיו, לא עכשיו, לא יודעת. Chiron Aries is also about the marginalized in the elite, or the elite is the marginalized. And this is because of the genetic issues that affect also what's sexual. Basically calling to be inclusive of that which is an anomaly. A lot of the antidote to the struggles in this society have to do with honoring the feminine. It's antidoting the of course it's also the challenge because it's the trauma of transmutation. Um, but I guess people from within those communities, up until very recently, or up until the Epstein files, were not allowed to speak on that. Um, it also put an end to the excess violence, where the only deterrent we have is violence. It doesn't bring people back to the negotiation table, it brings them to destruction of entire humanity, which indeed we see. Also, when it comes to um, the naming and the names in the media, or the mergers and acquisitions in the media, consolidation and competitions. We see that in the medicine that is castration, which I mentioned previously with the gates. Oh, Saturn also connects to age. In societies where women couldn't age, eventually men wouldn't age. And what do I mean by that? They would simply die young. And then they try to use violence to transcend the physical existence. A more simple solution is to honor the feminine. um, I want to also talk about the castration of the artists. Um, when people were dedicated in their entire existence to certain things, there was a belief that it would make them, let's say, amazing artists and so on and so forth. Now, it also creates a limit to the type of stories that can be told, which affects the entire society. I believe a lot of the castration issues that we are dealing with, whether it's COVID or psychiatry or whatnot, has to do with the castration of the artists. Okay, what is happening within those basically very marginalized societies. It's kind of like they rule the world, but in many cases they rule the world in their helplessness, and um, and so those things that are happening to them and the things that they do to others that are considered the feminine, namely the expandable children and so on, is seen, and then people say, "Oh, the Jews are to blame." Um, okay, but these are patterns. Um, let's say anti-Semitism or big losses to the Jewish communities is by design a part of the cycle of basically torture, death, and torture rebirth. It actually sustains the very Jews that they want to annihilate, but it doesn't change the structure from the core of what the problem is. This makes it difficult for people who have ancestor Jews and makes it difficult for people that deal with that from the outside. Um, so Chiron Aries here is also the wound of um, the marginalized in and amongst themselves. In countries like China or Afghanistan, China is very patriarchal, had very patriarchal dynasties. Um, it was so much so that if we take a look at the pirate story of the pirate, Qing Shi. So Madame Qing was basically a trafficked child, and she would meet her later husband, and he was a trafficked young boy that was trafficked to be pirate. And then she would eventually marry him, and he would die at 36, and she would consolidate an empire of piracy. One of the main things that they did was, at least to set the orders to, kill rapists and kill people who mistreat hostages. Madame Qing consolidated wealth in that way, and this gives her a lot of power until the Opium Wars. She could stand up to a Chinese dynasty. They took over the seas. But because she was doing, no, you know what is piracies? They protected the villages that provided for them, but they sold um, drugs and so on and so forth, and gamblings and so on. I don't know how come they were, like, the question of was there sex trafficking is very odd, but the minute that they abolished rape, or they took steps to abolish rape, the situation became such that only by opium wars that were kind of like bigger drug dealers were they taken down. Probably also because the abolition of rape was not too prevalent, and um, because they haven't completed transmuted from being pirates to having land. But Madame Ching, she grew up at basically abroad at sea, so she knew the territories of the seas, and not, let's say, the boots on ground. Um, um, what do I learn from this story? Madame Ching knew where to, how should I say that? She consolidated her wealth. Then she opened like gambling or stuff like that, but um, the only issue that would be left to sort out and transmute is the income on the basis of addiction. And yet, coming from being basically a raped child that married another raped child, because to traffic this boy to be a pirate would probably take to rape him and mind control him. And she managed to transmute many, many things that on land in a dynasty that is very patriarchal, she couldn't. Or alternatively, if she would, she'd probably be running China. Good thing, bad thing, who knows? Because I think she could be able with land to transmute also from being dependent on drug trade or gamblings to economy that actually economies. And if that would happen in entire China, it would happen in entire world. It's simply too much of a territory to not affect holistically entire frequency of the earth. Um, I want to address the topic of disgust. And the disgust has a lot to do, ascendant 18-degree Leo, um, with fathers that towards the child, um, or towards the girls or the boys and the girls, would be um, and here's the thing, what they would do with children, it would be seen also in any other random interaction. Um, and then there are also the people that were transmuting sexual trauma from infanthood, even if by psychic or by astral, and what they would be transmuting is also inner disgust at the world. Okay, okay. And this disgust is at boundary violation. It is basically creating chronic inflammation from the chronic helplessness. Okay. There's also the topic of euthanasia that exposed these practices because the society had to deal with the termination of life. And in most such societies, we see that there was prohibition on suicide. For example, Jews used to bury those who committed suicide outside the fence. It's something that I was one of the activists against in my teenagehood. And I would come to learn a lot about the topic of suicide, the social construct of suicide, and the personal construct around choice. And then eventually I learned about the fact that there was programming to try to make people to commit suicide if they would remember the violence that they were going through. After an hour, so I will stop here.